Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchins.
Whitetail Rendezvous is pleased to announce a partnership with GoHunt.com. Who's GoHunt.com? Well, if you're a DIY hunter, you need the information at GoHunt.com/insider. Why? Because it provides 4,200 profiles, every unit, every species, and every season. Furthermore, they give in-depth analysis, interactive maps, unit access, and seasonal trends. Draw odds are very important, and they give you the most accurate information in the business. All this is available when you go to GoHunt.com/insider. Make sure you use promo code WR when you join Insider. You'll get a $50 gift card for GoHunt.com Gear Shop. All in all, if you're hunting out west in 2018, GoHunt.com Insider is where you need to be to get all the research information. When you use promo code WR, Whitetail Rendezvous receives a small commission from GoHunt.com. To a special episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. I'm heading up to Minnesota, and I'm with a group of men and women, Eric Thorson, Menno Caulfield, and Benjamin Pena. They're all going to talk about the governor's 16th annual Minnesota deer opener. Guys and gals, welcome to the show, and let's start off with Eric. Eric, why has the state carried on this tradition for 16 years?
Because it's a great event here in the state of Minnesota. The firearms deer opener attracts hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans participate each year. So we have nearly 500,000 deer hunters in the state, and have been having an annual deer season since 1970. That was about the last time the state season was closed down. So we've had a pretty healthy deer population and strong deer hunting tradition for a long time here in Minnesota. So just a celebration of that opening weekend of deer season here in Minnesota.
Now, Menno, I think you were up at Grand Rapids last year. What can a person expect if they head up to Hinckley?
Well, it's a big celebration of deer hunting in Minnesota. It's a really important part of Minnesota culture and the outdoors. And if you show up, there's a good chance you have opportunity to learn a lot of new skills or maybe polish up on some of your skills. Last year, they had a butchering demonstration. There were a lot of equipment demos. There were also conservation officers on site with the Wall of Shame trailer to answer questions and also discuss stories of previous violations. They usually have a group photo, a nice banquet. There's celebrities on site as far as the state or elsewise goes in regards to the outdoor industry as well as politicians. It's a good experience. There's a lot of folks there ready and willing to celebrate the opener of deer season.
In the deer hunting tradition, I think of Michigan, I think of Wisconsin, I think of Minnesota. It's long steeped about heading up north, heading to the cabin. And Ben, what are your memories about your hunting tradition?
My memories, well, I grew up with my mother who introduced me to deer hunting. We knew nothing, and we made friends with some good deer friends of ours now out in western Minnesota. And every year we would go out for the opener with a group of them from 6 to 8 people on one farm. It was a good time. That really made a lasting impression on me. I try and do that with individuals now with the Minnesota Learn to Deer Hunt program.
Yeah, you've been on a number of podcasts and people have talked about your mentorship, and I'd just like to talk a little bit about that because it's so important to recruitment. Why have you dedicated yourself to mentoring new hunters?
Well, unfortunately, new hunters we're not able to maintain the new hunters across the country. I don't know the exact numbers, but they're dropping steadily. So I'm just doing my part with the individuals that I'm around and working with through the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, BHA, a few other local chapters, to just invest in our hunting community and give adults and youth the best opportunity to get out into the field that we can offer them.
What are some of the things that you share right off the bat with new hunters to keep them safe?
Well, the program that I'm heavily involved with, our 5th year, is the Minnesota Learn to Deer Hunt for Adults. And part of the program that we curriculum is that we require everyone to go through firearm safety. Same thing that anybody, children go through, youths, adults, we require it all. And then we do a full field day and multiple range day trips.
So they're well indoctrinated before they even go to the field.
It's a ongoing process. So it's a lot of on your own homework, because in Minnesota, adults can do it online, and that's the majority of the individuals through our program have done it. And we do a hands-on class curriculum and firearms introduction at the range. And it's a one-on-one mentor hunt.
So it's just you and the other adult men or women?
Well, yeah, for the whole
in the
class.
field.
So say there's 15 participants in the class that are new hunters. We call them 101 hunters. There's 15 mentors that go out. So it's a one-on-one hunter-mentor during the actual hunt. And then participation in the classes is taught mainly by a DNR lead. James Brenham is the lead now for this program. And the adult mentors like myself that have been involved heavily, we participate as well.
And by the way, Ben, thank you for being a first responder and going out in freezing temperatures. During the summer, I know it's hot and stuff, but below zero, sub-zero weathers as a firefighter, thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Menno, when you're looking at women in the outdoors, how do you help them get comfortable in talking about hunting and then actually going afield?
Well, they've got to show interest on their own. It certainly has to be something that comes from within. They can't be pushed by somebody. Maybe if they don't have an interest, it's not really worth pushing them, because you could make people uncomfortable, anyone uncomfortable, much less just women. But, one of the things I talk about is the experience and being out, and a lot of women are attracted to the sport by the increased opportunity to spend time with family and develop memories with family, and then also spend time outdoors. And then also a lot of them are motivated by food, and they're interested in the food aspect. But as far as getting them to go actually out in the field, programs like Ben's, or the ones that Ben's involved with, these multiple course and sequence programs that develop competency and then also develop a social support aspect, gives them more confidence to the point where they will feel comfortable and confident in their mentor and their ability to go out in the field and eventually by themselves. And so there's that. It's tough to find somebody that is interested in learning. I don't know why. Sometimes it's maybe a personal thing where they're afraid to either ask, or when you ask them, they're uncomfortable. You have to have a personal relationship with them. And then the next step to actually get them out in the field is building their confidence and maintaining that interest in a positive way. And so there are several stages of getting them to that point, but you certainly, like Ben mentioned, you just can't pick somebody up and put them out in the field regardless of their sex. You got to kind of build their interest and confidence and then get them out there. I don't know if that answers your question, but
very well. Let's talk about
one real important thing,
sure,
Bruce, that I didn't hear Meadow say. Being raised and introduced to hunting from my mother, and one thing that I've learned with adults and children, you have to keep it fun.
Yeah.
And you have to make sure that if they're not having fun, or read some signals as a mentor, if they're cold, if they're those little cues, change something up or take a break. Yep. You can't do I'm going to sit out here for 18 hours and freeze, and I can't move or talk. That just doesn't work anymore.
Right.
You got to make it fun for sure. Keep them warm, keep them comfortable, ask the right questions. Ben said cues. A lot of times people won't be honest about being miserable, and that is very important. Thank you, Ben.
And one thing that I learned early on with my son or sons and my grandchildren, we started off antelope hunting. Antelope hunting typically is fair weather. 2, you see a lot of game. You see hundreds of head of antelope. And 3, spot and stalk and run and gun and all the different techniques that we use for them, keeps them engaged the whole day, so that at night, they're worn out, but they want to go back out and drive the truck. They're 12 years old and you're on the ranch and they're driving the truck, and the whole experience is fun. And I would just echo that. Your thoughts, Eric?
Yeah, Minnesota DNR has really been trying to increase the opportunities related to youth hunters, and new adult hunters as well. So we have this coming weekend, we have a youth firearms deer season, an early season, a 4-day hunt in southeastern Minnesota and northwestern Minnesota. So we have about 5,000 youth that participate in that annually, trying to get them hooked on hunting. We're looking to expand that season elsewhere in the state here in the near future. And you also have a number of special youth hunts around the state and special opportunities for youth to spend time with their parent or guardian or adult mentor and have a good experience in hunting. Usually when it's a little warmer in October rather than the November deer opener. But we are it's a big priority of the state to bring up the next generation of deer hunters here in the state because they are the ultimate conservationists. So they're important for a variety of reasons.
Well, it is October 11th, and you do have a cold front coming your way, so I don't know how it's going to work out.
Yeah, we have some good tracking snow on the ground right now, about an inch or so outside my office.
So it's going to be, keeping it fun is going to be the hallmark. Eric, let's stay right with you, and let's talk about the different regions and the hunter density in those regions.
Yeah, we have a lot of deer hunters. We've been lucky in this state to maintain kind of participation when other states have been slipping. We have such a strong tradition here. So we have, as I mentioned, nearly 500,000 deer hunters in the state, and it's the woods is pretty crowded, especially in the prime deer areas for the firearms opener. We have upwards of 12 deer hunters per square mile in a lot of permit areas in the prime areas. But if you are willing to hunt during the week or the second weekend or go archery hunting or muzzleloader hunting, there's much less pressure during those seasons. And encourage people to take advantage of and spend more days in the field and maybe try a different weapon. So there are some great opportunities, but we do have a lot of hunters in the state, and you will see a lot of orange, especially on the opening weekend. But it's a great camaraderie too, and a lot of big deer camps, and that's part of it too, to spend time with friends and family on that opening weekend. But a lot of different opportunities throughout the state.
What's the overall hunter success?
For our firearms deer seasons, last year about 35% success. Of hunters harvested one or more deer. We have pretty liberal regulations here in the state. Bow hunters were upwards of 20% success, and muzzleloader hunters were just a bit below that. It's generally late season, cold, snowy conditions, so it's a little and tough. And deer have been hunted for a few months already, so a little bit more skittish and don't move quite as much. So, but really good success, and we do have a growing deer population here in the state, and pretty healthy statewide. So lots of good opportunities, and hunters can expect to see deer, and we do have a pretty liberal season this year too. So will be able to pull the trigger when they do see a deer as well.
You said your population is trending upwards. What's your best guess or census of the Minnesota deer herd?
We generate population estimates based on individual deer permit areas across the state, and we have about 130 of those, and it varies widely. I think statewide we're right around 1 million animals or so, but we manage on a much smaller scale, and the population has trended upwards, especially in the northern half of the state, since we had hard back-to-back winters in 2013 and 14, which has a significant effect on the deer population, and so our populations have been growing since then in northern Minnesota.
Mano, where do you like to hunt in Minnesota?
Well, I'm in northern Minnesota, and I don't really have opportunities to travel south, which, obviously our success rate probably would increase down there. But I hunt somewhere different every year. I know people that have sat in the same tree for 20 years, but I've hunted all over northern Minnesota in several different units, and I usually find somewhere extremely ambitious to sit or take my climber into. And, I've been lucky here and there, but I really don't have a single spot that I've gone back to, just because I like to experience different areas, and I'm just kind of a wanderluster like that. But I do like hunting around the Grand Rapids area, especially north of Grand Rapids. It's really pretty there. The deer densities aren't as high, but there's still a good chance for success. And so I do like to hunt in the Grand Rapids area. One of these days, I've got a bucket list to hunt out of the Boundary Waters. When my daughter's a little older, maybe she can come with me. But I definitely want to hunt the Boundary Waters before freeze up.
That is ambitious.
I hunted moose there, so we killed a moose out of a canoe. I think I can do a deer.
Heck yeah! If you took a moose out of there, and folks,
Yeah.
Just look at a map and look how huge that piece of property is. I don't know how to explain it, but
Yeah.
it's wild. It's wild country, accessible, and
Well,
by
if you see one,
canoe.
it might be a good one because I've seen some pretty good bucks there while scouting for moose.
Ben, your thoughts about where you like to hunt?
I enjoy hunting all over. I've over my hunting career, I've had a chance to hunt pretty much all corners of the state. And I just patchwork it. I usually do as an adult. I've usually done opener just south of Grand Rapids in public land. And then I just move all about. I can hunt 15, 20 minutes out of the cities here, or I can drive 6 hours. So,
Now, have you ever hunted down along the Mississippi River
yes, I've
in
hunted.
the Twin Cities zone or whatever they call it?
We have a 601 zone, and I've hunted down by Hastings, and then just south of one of our suburbs, but it's not along the river. So,
Because I've seen, when I used to work, when I fly in, fly out, I used to see deer, from the airplane, you know, and I'd look down and go, oh, it's got to be great, deer hunting there because, it's tricky hunting suburban deer. There's no question about it. But it looked like fun, and you get down some of those marshes, um, and there's got to be big bucks on there.
yep. But not everything's about antlers. We have a real good program in the 601 area and a few other regions that it's unlimited doe, and they're trying to use that as a method of maintaining the deer population as well. And it also allows better opportunity for harvest.
Point well taken. And because you teach people how to break down their deer and process it and then enjoy a fine meal.
I try to. I'm not an expert, but I've learned over the years that processing at a commercial facility can be expensive. Doing it at home can be kind of expensive too once you get all the equipment. But it's enjoyable, and you get the meat the way that you want it. So,
It's part of the experience. It's almost part of the tradition for me, and I imagine for Ben too. It's kind of I very rarely ever have a deer process, and they're usually not my deer, but it's just a part of the process or the experience for me to hang and age and butcher your own animal. I don't know if it is for Ben, but to me, it's
oh
just
yeah,
part of the
yep.
experience. I
Yep,
enjoy it.
It is for me as well. Love doing that.
And folks, if you haven't jumped into doing that, because it is the easiest thing is to take it to a processor and get the money. But I can remember when I first started hunting in Wisconsin, and we would hunt in the morning. We'd get some deer, we'd hang them up, and then in the evening there'd be a big meal and stuff. But basically, what the men were doing and the experienced hunters were doing, they were breaking it down because we were feeding a number of families. And I was a gopher, but I just watched them, and they had all the tools and everything, and they just broke it down and put it in bins, and then put it in the cold storage, and and we were feeding people, and it went from field to plate really, really, really quickly, and that's part of the hunting tradition. And so I would just encourage everybody, your next year, process it yourself, and you can get enough tools to do that relatively inexpensive, and then just take simple recipes and go for it. Ben, your thoughts?
That's I think it's really important to know how to process your own animal because it completes the circle. Taking the time to learn the proper methods to get out into the field and the proper methods of providing a meal from what you harvested and the giving the thanks and you will probably end up teaching people in the process of every aspect of that, and it rounds it out.
It's a very
It,
personal thing. Go ahead.
and it's also a pretty important skill for a modern deer hunter as well, especially if they're traveling to different states to be able to process a deer, either quarter it or bone it out, just to meet the carcass import restrictions related to disease.
Yes.
Especially concerns with chronic wasting disease. I know we just have a video we posted on our website about quartering deer for hunters, so they're not transporting carcasses and potentially spreading disease around the country or within the state. So it's an important skill for all hunters to master.
And on that note, it also it makes it cleaner and gives hunters a better image. So if you're traveling across the state or across the country, you don't have a big carcass hanging out where people might get upset by that or turned off. You can fit one or two deer in a modern size cooler, no problem. You save space in a vehicle, maybe travel in a smaller vehicle, make it more efficient. Not that I do that. I do all the processing that I can. I do have a larger vehicle, but it just gives us a better image when you're flying across the country or traveling.
Menno, you had a good post from Shane Mahoney about taking pictures on your Facebook page. You want to address that, please?
Well, I won't go into too much detail about some of the images I've seen this year, but they're ones that I find highly concerning in regards to the way the animal is portrayed, or the way that maybe the animal is not necessarily cleanly killed and then it's shown. These are images that bother me as a hunter, but I can guarantee non-hunters and anti-hunters are really affected by those images. And so, like Shane discusses in the Boone and Crockett page, it's really important for hunters to be respectful of the game themselves, but also when you're putting those images out there, you are representing everybody that hunts, and you are representing the future of hunting is basically writing on the image that you're portraying. And it's a very big responsibility in that regard. And so one of the things that I encourage people, and I'm kind of maybe anal or annoying about, is taking really good photos of game that's been cleaned up to the best of your ability in a respectful manner that, portrays the animal and yourself, but not necessarily a grip and grin, as we would call, but something that kind of tells a story, maybe the site or location, or maybe your rifle or the equipment you use to harvest the animal, as well as yourself and maybe hunting partners, but not making it all about the kill, not making it all about the grip and grin and the bloody photos. Those are really quite detrimental. And, they've always been there, but now that we have social media and the internet, and those images are permanent, they are out there forever, and anybody can grab them and save them, whether it's a screenshot or whatever. Those photos, if you put something like that out there, it really is damaging to our images as hunters and, basically the future of hunting. I grew up in California. I was there when Prop 97 went through, when mountain lion hunting was banned. And I remember watching the video footage of a lion being killed in a poor manner, and how that footage was used basically as ammunition towards the elimination of lion hunting in California, because it was very emotional. And it touched on those emotional strings of people, and that emotion was what got them out to vote. And it can happen to any game species if hunters continue to portray a negative image, whether they mean to or not. Is not good for any of us. And certainly it just takes a little extra thought to take a good photo if you're going to share it with the world. And I highly encourage that. And it can be done. I guarantee it.
Yeah, and Tony Bynum, he's the president of POMA, Professional Outdoor Media Association, and he's a world-class photographer. And, just Google Tony or anybody that Ron Spooner. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. There's guys that have put together great little courses, or, hey, this is a good way to tuck the feet underneath, and you just take handing weights with you, all these little tricks. And photos tell the story now. In journalism today, in the digital age, the photo tells the story, and the words just connect the pictures. That's it.
People don't want to read more than 2 minutes, and they really
if that
they don't want to watch more than 2 minutes. And so, in order to get your message across, you got to think of it as a tidy package. An Instagram post, a few words, and it's tough, but it can be done. And I think it's really important that we all look at photos that we admire, or like you said, look at photographers that are professional photographers, and look at what it is that they're doing and emulate it, so that you can get similar results. And then also, like you said, tell the story in a respectful manner that is visually appealing.
Eric, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree, and not always, you don't always need to have an animal in the picture, a dead animal. A lot of it's about the experience. Show, like my son, I had him on a mentored deer hunt last year. He's sitting in the stand and he's reading a book while he's waiting. So some neat photos like that, or something about the experience. So people, we as hunters understand it's more than just about harvesting an animal. It's about the whole experience and the camaraderie and being outdoors. So kind of tell the story and talk about the broader experience and take photos of your time outdoors.
Let's switch it up a little bit and talk about what the DNR is doing for CWD and EHD.
We have not had any recorded EHD cases in the state, something that we are continuing to look out for. I know our neighboring states have had EHD outbreaks and, as a concern, but we have not had issues here in the state. Chronic wasting disease is another matter. We've been pretty aggressive with our management related to CWD. We currently have 3 captive cervid facilities here in the state that have had recently had animals that tested positive for CWD. So we're doing surveillance testing of wild deer, hunter harvested deer around those facilities right now. And then also in southeastern Minnesota, one small area, we have wild deer that have some chronic wasting disease in the population. We're trying to actively sample those deer and manage that outbreak, and hopefully we can stamp it out before it gets established. And we're also looking at neighboring states that have more of a CWD issue, like in northeastern Iowa, close to our border, and western Wisconsin. And so those are also threats that we're concerned about. But that's one of the main concerns that we have as deer managers here in the state is a threat of chronic wasting disease.
Now, Ben, when you're mentoring people, what do you tell them if they're hunting in areas that in Minnesota that are known to the possibility of CWD exists, as far as how to handle the meat and eat the meat?
Eating the meat really isn't a problem. It's good to be educated about it, but I don't think that there's ever been a case of transmission from CWD to humans. I could be wrong on that. I haven't heard of any.
I think the CDC recommends if your deer test positive for CWD, not to eat the meat, just as a precautionary measure. But we don't have real large issue here in the state. But go ahead, Ben.
No problem. So we teach to use gloves. It's more of a modern thing, a little cleanlier. It helps prevent getting any nicks or anything. There's deer aren't clean, especially the hide and things like that. Break down the animal. Once it's registered, because we have some registration laws that you have to do some steps after harvest immediately. But once it's legally able to be broken down, let it cool, break it down, get it packaged up, and then keep cleaning it as you go. If you're concerned about CWD or near an area, don't do like a bone-in neck roast. Don't sever the spinal column and keep that with your meat. If you're going to quarter it, try to avoid those sections, and that's kind of what we do.
Along the lines of butchering, that a lot of people use meat saws and stuff, and supposedly it can be in the Eric would know more, but it can be in the marrow as well. It can be in the meat tissue or the muscle tissue. But one of the things that I rarely use a saw. I always just use like fillet knives, and as long as you don't, I guess I've never had the need other than I like having some bones in because I like the marrow flavor. A lot of times you just avoid the bones altogether and remove the meat from the bones. That's one way that I encourage folks to do it. But occasionally, I like my crown roast. I like that tomahawk steak, and so it's tough. But certainly, like they said, its highest concentration are in lymph nodes and the spinal column and the brain. And so one of the things that everybody should know is just to avoid severing that spinal column and allowing that fluid to contact your meat. And so avoid cutting bones and certainly avoid the spinal column and the fluid there. And if your deer is outwardly ill in appearance, and like Eric said, get it tested if you can. Try to store it in the meantime. And if it tests positive, unfortunately, I don't know, you're going to probably not want to eat it. Eric would know. You'd have to bury it, right, Eric? Like a deep depth burying?
Yeah, or a lined landfill or incinerator. So there's information on proper disposal of infected carcasses. But you wouldn't want to eat one that tests positive.
Yeah, if it looks outwardly sick. Yeah, go ahead.
So I have one little thing. One of the things that we also do when someone does harvest an animal, we try to teach them when they're skinning the animal and breaking it down. If they do sever the spinal column with that knife, to change it up and use a different piece of equipment to break the animal down when you're cutting into the meat. So you're always changing and cleaning, but you don't use that one that was exposed to the spinal tissue in the spinal column.
Eric, what's the rule if you see a deer that's obviously stressed or sick? I mean, in chronic wasting disease, they're just wasting away. And so if you see that, should people shoot it and report it or just let it go? What's the right way to handle that situation?
Um, I guess it depends on the season. We were always interested in hearing about sick deer. We have a lot of information on our website on how to report sick deer. Usually go to a local wildlife manager, conservation officer, report it to agency staff, and so they can follow up and do investigation there. Depending on the symptoms or what's happening with that deer, you might want to sample it, shoot it, and maybe get the whole carcass transport down to a diagnostic lab or get it sampled, lymph nodes or other tissues. If it's during the season, if it's sick, I mean, if you shoot it with your license, you have to tag it and use your tag. But then we can do some follow up testing after that as well. But we certainly want to hear about any sick deer and something that's a real concern of ours.
So what I hear you saying, don't let an arrow go or bolt go or muzzleloader. Don't harvest the deer unless you want to use your tag on that deer, which, if it's sick, I wouldn't do.
Yeah, but we, especially in the CWD area, we want to remove diseased animals from the population too.
Right.
Certainly can have a discussion with the hunter about the circumstances surrounding that take of that deer, but we want to remove diseased animals from the population, especially in our 603 zone down there, our disease management zone. But we also want to hear about sick deer elsewhere as well, and we can kind of follow up with that individual hunter on kind of the best or person that observed that deer about the best course of action.
So what I hear you saying is communicate with the DNR and go from there.
Correct. Yes.
Eric, let's talk about predation in the state of Minnesota. You've got coyotes and bears and wolves, and they all affect the deer herd one way or another. So what's Minnesota doing about predation?
Our number one predator of whitetail deer is wolves. That's been, they've been part of the landscape in northern Minnesota and the ecosystem for a long period of time. We did have state management of wolves there for a few years, and they had hunting and trapping seasons, pretty conservative seasons. Now they are protected, federally protected once again, so we don't have that management control. But the wolf population is pretty stable in recent, last 10 years or so. So it really hasn't been increasing that much. The range has expanded a bit, but something that we've always lived with and kind of managed around when it comes to deer populations. And when we have state control of the wolf management again, we'll probably continue to manage the wolves at the appropriate population level. Black bears are another predator, especially newborn fawns in the spring. We do have a pretty healthy black bear population. We're trying to increase the population a bit through quotas and permits that are given to bear hunters in the state. So that is certainly a predation presence kind of in the northern part of the state as well, but something we've been able to manage with for a number of years. And then pretty much statewide, where we don't have a denser wolf population, we have plenty of coyotes, and they're an unprotected mammal in the state. So it's continuous season, no limit, open for hunting and trapping. But as you know, coyotes are pretty crafty and smart, and it's pretty hard to affect their populations too much. And certainly a concern of some coyote predation. But I think the bigger factors here in Minnesota are really hunter harvest. We have 100,000 predators. 500,000 predators in the form of licensed deer hunters, and then also the severe winters that we have on occasion here in Minnesota can have a pretty significant effect on whitetail deer populations. So those are the two major mortality factors that we plan for as severe winters and hunter harvest each year.
Have you ever had any experiences with wolves when you've been out in the woods?
Yeah, I actually participated in 2 of the 3 years for the wolf hunt and trapping season, and I was successful during trapping season 1 year. And so that's kind of, where I used to live up by Big Fork, and they were on the driveway every 5 to 6 days. It's kind of when they move through, and they're there always. And I've never had a negative interaction with dogs. I do have gun dogs, but I'm pretty, use common sense and keep the dogs within hearing and yelling distance when I'm hunting them. And outside of that, I see them occasionally during deer season. I know, usually at least one person in our camp sees a wolf during deer season, and they're there. And like I mentioned earlier, they've always been here in northern Minnesota. They've never disappeared or were extirpated from our state. And I think people in northern Minnesota are quite tolerant of them. And my personal experience, they haven't been an issue. And I've just use common sense and be aware of the risks associated with them when you're running dogs. But yeah, certainly I'm pro management, and I really look forward to the day that the state can manage them again when they're outside of the federal protection. And I think our state's fully capable of it, and that was my primary contact and experience with wolves was that trapping and hunting season.
And you love hunting upland game.
Yes.
And so what kind of dogs do you run?
I have Deutsch, Drahthaars, and English Setter. And so, those dogs the Drahthaars are pretty substantially sized dogs, but, they certainly would have issue. I've yet to have a bad encounter with wolves with dogs on the ground. I know other folks that have, and, wolves will try and kill dogs because they're perceived as competition, just like they kill coyotes. And, I haven't had an issue yet. And, knock on wood, but I use common sense, and I don't let my dogs range too far. And the few times that they have gotten too far away, I do worry. But again, it's using common sense in the woods. So far, it's done well for me.
Ben, your thoughts?
They're a part of our natural. I don't know the right term. Ecology. So I'm entering their terrain. I think it's great to be able to live and hunt in a state that has wolves. I'm not too worried about running into a wolf as far as like safety or anything like that. For me, it's more of a beauty and they're so majestic. I did participate in the hunt when it was legal. For applying, I didn't get drawn, but I think as long as they're protected, we're kind of stuck. But if the state gets the opportunity to take control again, great. So that's what we need to do.
Yeah, my 2 cents on it, just manage the resource, and wolves are part of that, and they're high, they're the top predator in many states, and outside of man. And I mentioned this on Facebook Live, to be out in the wilderness of the wilds and hear a wolf howl is really truly a beautiful thing. And if you haven't ever experienced that, and you need to, because that tells you the whole ecostructure is healthy. It's a healthy ecostructure because all the predators and all the animals that they prey on and so forth, they're all there. And so that means that there's good things going on in the woods. Non-scientific explanation, but I think it's cool. Eric, let's talk about the whitetail plan for the state of Minnesota to keep your herd stable in some areas, increasing in other areas. What's the state's plan?
Yeah, actually, we just finalized the state's first ever whitetail deer management plan. It's a kind of a statewide strategic plan, so kind of big picture items, kind of on directing how we should use our resources and what kind of activities you should be involved with over the next 10 years. But it's the first time we've developed a plan such as that. In the past, we've always managed deer populations in the smaller deer management area or permit area scale. So we have 130 of those throughout the state of Minnesota. And so this is the first kind of overarching plan that we've had in the state. And one of the things that's components of the plan that's got quite a bit of attention is we have a deer harvest target of 200,000 deer annually. And so we'll try to maintain that or kind of meet that goal kind of over a 3-year kind of running average, understanding that deer populations fluctuate with winter weather and other conditions, but that's one of the components that's got a fair amount of attention and might be the only plan in the country that has a deer harvest objective in it.
Menno, how's the DNR doing in Minnesota managing the deer herd?
Well, they're doing an excellent job, in my opinion. The pendulum swings because the Department of Natural Resources in Minnesota takes into account public interest. And so when they do have a deer planning season, basically every couple of years they have a deer plan that they develop, they do take public input. And so some of those decision-making processes are based off of what the individuals with interest in that particular area want to see. And so, the previous plan, they wanted to reduce the population, the local input did, and now they want it to increase. And so, to some extent, the Department of Natural Resources, there is a pendulum swing in management structure. Every year they change their management. It's adaptive management, which is what you'd expect or hope for under a sound management or game management system. So there is some pendulum swing, but a lot of that has to do with public interest or public input. And so it's not necessarily based strictly off of biological carrying capacity. There is a fair amount of public interest the Department of Natural Resources does and in a big part that adds to public ownership of the resource. The Department of Natural Resources in Minnesota firmly stands by the fact that they are basically the stewards of the resources for the state, the state citizens. And so it's not necessarily a closed door policy with the Department of Natural Resources here in Minnesota. And so in that regard, I'm a wildlife biologist. I instruct in natural resources sciences here at Itasca Community College. And, my opinion and my previous experience that Minnesota as a state does a very good job. Our Natural Resources Agency is pretty exceptional in a lot of ways. And so I would say I agree with the way they do things.
Ben, your thoughts?
The DNR does a fabulous job. Everybody has different viewpoints on it. Some are positive, some are not. I hear both sides of it, but myself working with them with a close relationship over the last 5 years in the Learn to Hunt program and paying attention to what our state does versus things that happen in other states, hunting and traveling. I try and pay attention to that. Minnesota does a fabulous job. This last deer plan, they did an excellent. I feel they did an excellent job by incorporating public input and giving the opportunity for the public to address things over the course of this management plan that they've had, working with citizens, groups like Minnesota Deer Hunters Association, maybe some park input, because deer aren't there just to be hunted. They're there to be a part of the park landscape. So when you go to a state park, you can possibly see some deer. There's hunters and non-hunters that put money into it. So it's all of our property, and the DNR is doing a wonderful job with the deer population and all the populations under their control in Minnesota.
Eric, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just got to mention that we have population goals for local areas, these deer permit areas, and so that those population goals are set by a stakeholder team with public input. And so our main goal each year is try to design our seasons and bag limits to meet those population goals for that particular local area. So taking in input of the public and trying to balance different people's interests. Farmers have a different view of deer, and foresters have a different view of deer than hunters. So we're kind of trying to find a compromise solution there in the middle and try to make everybody satisfied, I guess, as a stake in deer.
Now, where would a person go to get that information, to get that data? Is there a site?
Yeah, so you go to our DNR webpage, mndnr.gov, and in the search window, just type in deer management, and that'll bring you to the deer management page, and we have information there on our deer population goals and then our brand new statewide deer plan as well.
And
go ahead,
sorry,
Ben.
I believe you can click on that and request updates on it too, so you can get the most current information put out on it.
Yep, you can sign up for our Deer Notes email.
Yeah.
So just updates from DNR deer managers throughout the season and throughout the year.
Mano, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, how would they do that?
Well, you can find my contact information at the Itasca Community College website and under the faculty in the Natural Resources Department. But also, I'm easy to find on Facebook and Instagram, and I'm pretty responsive to PMs.
Ben, how would somebody reach out to you?
Facebook, Instagram, Minnesota BHA. I'm the hunting mentor coordinator. Minnesota DNR. I'm for the adult learn to deer hunt. I'm one of the lead mentors, so I'm easily found.
One last question: what do you wish you knew 5 or 10 years ago that you know now in regards to hunting?
I wish I would have started. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Meadow.
Well, on a broader scale of things, I wish I would have started putting in for preference points and draws in other states to take full advantage of the amazing resources we have in North America. That's pretty broad.
That's a really good point.
That's a great point, because in Colorado, there's some places 21 years just to get a Unit 2 elk tag.
Yes.
21 years.
Then you're crippled.
No.
Just kidding.
Oh man, that's a really hard question. I wish I was better at getting back into public access as I do now. 5-10 years ago, I was still hunting private property, and I've moved. Not that there's anything wrong with private property, but being able to enjoy public access and being willing to put the investment into it when you have so much public land, it lets you see areas that a lot of people don't see in Minnesota and the rest of the country.
Eric?
And I guess for me, just maybe in the past, maybe not get stuck in a rut and hunting the same places over and over again. It's really fun hunting with new people and new places. So kind of expand your horizons and try out new areas. There's just within the state of Minnesota, there's a huge variety of places to hunt, and there's a lot of deer hunters in the state to partner up with as well, and bring a new hunter out with you.
Yeah, the one thing that I've learned over the years is hunting is a journey. It's an experience. It's an adventure. And I wish when I was younger, I didn't make it so much about the hunt and the game and the competition. I was in competition with my buddies when we went out west hunting, and, did he get a bigger buck than I got and stuff like that. And that's all part of it because I'm competitive. But as I learned and as I traveled, and Meadow, and I don't know how much you've traveled, Ben or Eric, but I know Meadow has traveled so much. You come away from those experiences. You had a great hunt, even though you might never got your quarry because of the people you met, and you just interact with other people and the meals you shared in the sunrises and sunsets, and just seeing places that few people have literally ever walked. Hunting will take you there. And that's the biggest thing, that if you're young and you're competitive and you feel like, you've got to have, that article written about you or that TV show, throttle that back and enjoy the journey. Your thoughts on that, and then we'll close.
Me or who?
Anybody.
Okay. Well, obviously I've professed it. Hunting's taken me to some of the most amazing places on other continents and here in North America, and it has also brought me closer to some of the most amazing people I've ever met, and some folks that will stick with me the rest of my life and my mind and my memory, and also as friends. And like you said, hunting is a journey. It takes you on great adventures, and it enriches my life beyond any other way I could imagine.
It's memories. And don't be afraid of what they call tag soup. One of my most recent trip was to an island in Alaska. Had opportunities. I goofed up. Didn't come home with anything. We caught one fish. But it was an awesome DIY hunt, and we met some individuals that made it just spectacular, and it's great. And that's what it's all about, because it was a hunting effort.
Just thinking back, sometimes it's hard to get out of the house when it's blowing and cold and snowy or raining outside, but I've never regretted once going out hunting or getting outdoors. And so just get out there, and there's a lot to be learned and some great experiences to be had. So just get outdoors and do it.
Well, Ben and Meadow and Eric, on behalf of hundreds of thousands of listeners of Whitetail Rendezvous, thank you for being part of the 16th annual Minnesota Governor's Deer Hunting Kickoff. And, look forward to, getting to know you guys better. Hope we meet at ATA or show someplace down the line, and we can say hello and spend some time together.
Sounds good. Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Hey, folks, we got a new sponsor. It's called Buckwild Coffee. What's so special about Buckwild Coffee? Well, a gazillion people go to Starbucks every day and drink coffee. Well, why shouldn't Buckwild Coffee offer you light, medium, or dark roast with free shipping? All you have to do is go to whitetailrendezvous.com, go to shop, and order your coffee, and I'll ship it out for free. Hey, thanks so much for visiting Buckwild Coffee. The best brew in the West, the best brew around the campfire, the best brew in the hunting shack, the best brew anywhere. Buckwild Coffee. Get yours today.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.